Hey boys and girls, there's a video that's going around and some people have asked us to make comments on it. Some people think that it may be more Tesla lies or something, but in actuality we can verify that what was said in that video is pretty much 100% true. Munro Associates has been in business for 35 years and we've been costing and redesigning and designing products for even before that. At the end of the day, when somebody comes along and says, we need an expert, they come and see Munro. And even though we're a small company, our numbers are dead accurate. And that's why even sometimes lawyers and people like that come and see us, because they have to have the real truth. And when it comes to the real truth, that's what we bring to the party. So up here, we've been told that, hey, it looks like 50% of the parts are going to disappear. And today what we're going to do is tell you a little bit about how true that is. And the reason that we know that is because we do. We know exactly how much time and effort and what the exercise looks like in order to make sure that every component from a weld, a little spot weld, all the way up to the price of the engine, or in this case, the battery pack or whatever, everything we can cost and we can make accurate assessments. So here are some of the components that were on the Model 3. And we've been asked this question a couple of times, and that's why I've got this stuff at my fingertips. Because people are continuously saying, yeah, but how much is this going to cost? Or how much is this going to save? Or how many parts are going to disappear? Well, today you're going to find out. And I'm here with Carl. And so far I've been doing all the yakking. So Carl, why don't you, well, let me just do one thing before we turn this off. Here's how much money this is worth, 380 bucks. And here's another 315. So let's say roughly $700 as soon as you get rid of just one operation. And this right here is the brake system, the brake pedal boxes and stuff like that, and the steering and control system. That's what disappeared, and we've shown this before. We just don't think that people are paying attention. That's $700. We didn't put in the weight, but weight goes along with all that stuff. And so why don't you show them what our...
Well, sure. So let's start by looking at this image right here. So of course I said that this is a bench front seat vehicle. So just one row, no rear seat, which means that it's also a two-door vehicle, no rear doors, no rear door panels, the actuators, the handles, even not counting the things that we can't see. We know that between the original Model 3 and then the Model Y, they've increased these large castings, literally getting rid of hundreds of parts, thousands of tools, all those manufacturing steps. We can't really see that, but because they made a decision to make a two-door, one-row vehicle, there are things that we can automatically assume. Now, I had a question to you. For an OEM to make this type of decision, that's not common.
No.
That's a huge decision, and a lot of people would probably say you're crazy, especially within a lot of normal traditional OEMs. They don't want to give up those types of features. But what are we actually saving? So I want to show you something. This is one of the software tools that we use here within Munro. And we are really going through the entire vehicle, not only accounting for the parts, but also accounting for using the parts. So for me, one of the biggest eye-openers that I had when I started looking at the interiors is a simple screw. A little tiny screw that costs 3 cents coming in a big box. And many people, when I've dealt with purchasing within the companies I worked with, they ignore the screws. But what I've learned here is that screw comes in a box. You have to handle the box. You have to move the box to the line. Someone has to reach into that box and pick up a screw. You have to align that screw. You have to pick up a drill and drill it in place. You may even have to start that screw by hand. That 3 cent screw turns into 12 cents once you've actually used it.
Right.
So it's not just looking at the parts that we see, but it's also How am I using those parts? As you said, it goes down to the weld. It's not just the stamped part. It's putting it in place, fixturing it there, welding it, all of that process that adds up to that total cost. So we know this is a two-door vehicle. So what don't we have? We don't have rear door trim. This is from the Model 3. All of those squares account for components. All of these count for all of the operations to actually use those components.
Our process is hugely detailed. Hence the reason that we can say exactly how much things cost. That's the rear door trim. The rear door trim, that's just the rear door trim. This is the kind of detail that gets you to the right number. That's what we talked about at the beginning. So when people come along and they want to pull a number out of their tail, that's fine. But at the end of the day, if you want to know exactly what it's going to cost, you have to go into this kind of detail in order to find out basically where the bones are buried. And it certainly isn't going to be in piece cost. Piece cost is a resultant. It's not a driver. When you look at like the little screw that we were just talking about, a 3-cent or a 1-cent screw, and then you find out, well, no, it doesn't cost that. It costs 12 seconds, and the operator is basically tooled in at somewhere between $50 and $150 an hour, on and on and on and on. Plus there's floor space, plus there's heating and cooling, on and on and on and on. You have to go down to the nuts, the smallest of details in order to get to where we are. And that's why I asked Carl to drop this down so you can see these are the number of steps that you're going into, and it's just for the trim. Now, before we move on to something else, let's talk about something where Elon has said in the past that our numbers are fairly accurate. This in back of me is the Model 3 from 2018, which is the first one we tore to pieces. I already said that back there, and it's never been refuted or disputed, back there was 120 parts, not counting operations, not counting welds, not counting the goop. If you go over here and you look around, because I'm going to talk about this in a second, see all that thumb grade right there? That's all thumb grade and pumpable. Guess what? That's not in the 120, because this is an operation. It is a part per se, but it goes into a different format in order to determine what the true cost of this is. So let's say that's 120, and let's say here's another 120, and let's say that we got 60 parts in the middle, okay? What's that now? 300 parts. Let's count up over here. 1, 2, and then there's going to be a couple of cost raises that are going to, longitudinals we're calling them, and 3, 4. Ponder that. 300 parts versus 4. That's kind of like what's going on here with the Tesla design philosophy. It's not like this is rocket science to try and figure out. Yes, there's going to be attachments and whatnot, but most of them are going to be adhesives. So anyhow.
So that Model 3, when the parts were here, the top pad, the cross-car beam, the instrument panel, it had a closer to a traditional style of instrument panel. There was a carrier panel, there was a foam in place top pad, it has a skin on it.
Right.
It was heavy, it was big. We did a video on that one. By the time we got to the Model S, which I tore down, they had got rid of that carrier panel, and all of those attachments were going directly to the cross-car beam. Now here's a question that I have. I know within the OEMs there are people, maybe even teams of people, who are dedicated to designing those top pad carrier panels. They're coming to the next vehicle, what are they going to do? They're going to start designing the carrier panel without questioning why. No one wants to throw away the part that they are the expert in designing, so then they keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over. The thing that really encourages me about Tesla is the fact that they're not stuck on doing the same thing. The amount of change that we've seen in just 4 vehicles, it's well beyond. Because I know some vehicles that I've worked with where you have the seat structure that we're developing, and developing is a bad word because they've used the same seat structure for 20 years.
Yeah. At the end of the day, when you start looking at this kind of stuff, the engineers are usually under the gun, because what normally happens is they say, how many hours is it going to take to, or how much money is it going to cost for the engineering on this job? Okay, so we'll put in blah, 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 and let's say that it's $1 million. Well, the very first thing that somebody in finance is going to, well, you're going to have to trim that by 20%. What does that mean? Well, it means that the estimate, now you've got to try and thrift things out. And what are you going to thrift out? Innovation. Always, it's the first thing to go. Innovation, because again, I've told you a couple of times already, if you want to get ahead as an engineer in an OEM, you got to learn to say only one word, no. And the word no means, nope, I'm not going to do anything that's going to be different than my predecessor. It worked for him, it's going to work for me, and that's the way it's going to be. Is it heavy? Yep. Is it awkward? Yep. Is it inefficient? Yep. Is it innovative? Absolutely not. We got to say no. And that's kind of like the way it works. If you say no, you win. So to your point, this is pretty much standard. And when something like this comes along with a Model 2 or the Cybertruck or any of the other things that we've looked at with Tesla, they are not afraid to say yes. Let's try something different. So when you're looking at this at 50%, just with what Carl's been saying here, is 50% already. Two doors are missing, and this having a bench seat, that's a whole lot less.
Center console?
No center console. I mean, you're looking at significant reductions in the number of parts, the weight, the cost. It just goes on and on.
And when you're talking about the engineer and how the engineer's under the gun, when I designed interior plastics, we had a massive Excel sheet that we had to go through for every single plastic part we were going to release. And it had 273 design checks on it, which were all our best practices. And every single part that I was releasing, I had to go through every single check and say, yes, this applies, no, it does not apply. Did I meet the current best practice? Yes, I met the current best practice. If there was any no, I had to completely justify to the entire management team why it was a no and why even it not being the current best practice or the current way we do things, why I think that it'll be okay. I know one vehicle I released 147 parts. 147 parts with 273 checks. I wanted every single one of those to be green because the amount of time, the amount of effort for me to try and justify to them why I could do a change, I had no incentive to fight every one of those battles unless you have support from upper management who are willing to give you that time and to not say, you have an okay to tool release in 30 days, you have to have everything green checked for us to review. And I don't completely blame the engineers because they're trying to do the easiest job they can, but they need a management team that encourages them to say, yes, you can innovate. Yes, you can change. Is it going to cost us money now? And could we end up saying it didn't work in the end? I almost want to say failure is always an option because it means you're trying.
But so success.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's an option that people don't like to consider. And one of the other reasons, like, I'll throw rocks at my profession. I am an engineer, and I know what I've had to do in the past in order to make certain groups of individuals inside of a company happy. Number one on the hit parade, lawyers. Without a question of a doubt, lawyers and financial people have more to do with how the car is going to be designed than you can believe. People think it's styling and things like that, but at the end of the day, I can live with almost any style that I can manufacture. Almost any. But at the end of the day, am I going to go and take on the legal department? No. Am I going to take on the financial department? No. If I come along here and I say, hey, you know what? We're going to use carbon fiber, and that's one of the things that they're doing here. And that's, again, there are hundreds of parts in the top hat, what ordinary people call the body. There are hundreds of parts in here welded together. But that's not what I found when I went and tapped all the way around here. When Eric and I were walking around, tap, 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 carbon fiber makes a distinct noise. If you're an engineer and you understand it, you know precisely what this is made out of. Tap, tap, tap. If that's all in one big giant piece, guess what? I don't have to glue anything together. I don't have to rivet anything together. I don't have to weld anything together. I don't have to screw anything together. It's all in one big lump. And quite frankly, hitting 50% is a no-brainer. When you look at this vehicle, actually, we were already talking about this wheel right here, this rim. I'm guessing that if we pulled that off, we're going to see a knockoff. Like a knockoff is an old-fashioned way. They just put a shaft out and you put a big nut on it and call it a day. One component versus 4, 5, and sometimes 6 different studs and nuts that would go on here, because this tells me that there's a bump there. You could call it styling, but I'll bet you dollars to donuts this has probably got a reduction in the number of parts on it as well. Because if the boss says, and this would be Elon, I want the minimum number of parts, I want the minimum amount of labor, I want the maximum amount of quality. By the way, as you reduce parts, your quality goes up. As soon as you add parts, your quality heads south. And that's the way it works. And by the way, some of these componentry things like the carbon fiber, very high quality. It's like from now on, I'm producing a perfect stone. It won't move. It's not like sheet metal. It moves all the time. It moves until the day that they melt it again. That thing is going to have movement in it. It's just the way it is. With this, it doesn't. It's one big giant stone. Perfect every time. Just like those castings in back of Carl. All of them perfect.
So let's kind of take this conversation a different way. Cybercab Model 2. Cybercab, there is no steering wheel. About 10 years ago, I had a friend who was working for a company, a startup company, on autonomous vehicles. And he was very excited that they had testing of their vehicle. And I said, hang on a sec. I live out in the country. My driveway is 350 feet long. How am I telling my car that when I pull into my driveway, I want to be on the left side of the garage or the right side of the garage? Or what if I have mulch in the back that I want to drive into my backyard and put next to that tree? How do I tell my car that? And he looked at me and he says, you're not thinking about this the way we're thinking about it. We don't picture our cars ever leaving the road. And it got me thinking, like, just because something does not perfectly fit the way I think a car needs to be, doesn't mean that it's not a great thing for the market somewhere. And then even with my own criticism, I thought about it a little more. Just because I don't know how that would do what I want it to do today, doesn't mean it can't do it tomorrow. There are people who are working on those issues. I don't know who they are, and I don't know what the final solution is going to be. So I can't leave my own ignorance or have my own ignorance in saying, well, it's not ever going to be possible. Of course it's possible. I just don't know how it works today. So what are your thoughts in that to an autonomous vehicle and how someone's actually going to use an autonomous vehicle?
Well, to be quite frank, everybody on the planet has been doing research on the new modern car buyer. And one of the things is that I don't want to waste time learning how to drive my car. I just want to get from here to there. Do they care about style? Nope. Do they care about speed? Nope. Do they care about features and functions? Nope. All they care about is their cell phone. And I'm telling you what, the next generation is a cell phone generation. They don't want to drive. They don't care what the thing looks like, because all they're interested in is going from their house to the party and back home again and not getting arrested. That is why this is the perfect Model 2. This is the perfect vehicle to attract the new generation.
So going to the OEMs and speaking to marketing and speaking to the OEM management, you're saying, we want to help you design that $20,000 car. And they say, why do I want to design a $20,000 car? Why do I want to sell a $20,000 car when I'm selling cars for $50,000, $60,000? I'm getting more profit here.
Exactly.
Are you really getting more profit considering all the extra headache? And features, eliminating and reducing features. I've fought with that several times because who picks what the features are? Marketing. They want to have all these check boxes on their vehicle sales sheet to say, oh, we have this, 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 this.
Yeah.
Is the customer using it? Ford is now getting rid of their parallel parking assistant because people weren't using it. But yet once you put that in the vehicle, marketing thinks, well, we have to have it because we have to compete with someone else who has it. And since we've always had it, our customers expect it. Do they? If you could give them a $20,000 vehicle, I'm certain that there's a lot that they would be willing to say, I never used it anyway.
Right. But there's another thing too with marketing. If you don't come up with lots of ideas, then, hey, this guy's a dud. What do we need this guy for, or gal? I mean, that's the other part of the equation. Sometimes these features and functions show up just because. Hey, they gave me a list. I got to get 15 things. I'm going to get them. And they'll get them. There's no question about it. And then you put them in and find out they don't work, or they cost a lot of money, or you can't make them work, or on and on and on. And that's kind of what you wind up with. So what Tesla's done, somehow, is figured out what's needed and necessary. Now, when Eric and I went through this thing, I put my hand up. I felt the headliner. This is not Alcatel. This is some kind of plastic, cheap plastic junk. I put my hand on the trim pieces. This is not an expensive trim piece at all, period. They put a couple of bucks into the instrument panel, but not a hell of a lot. Why? Because if you're going for a ride in that car and it's like Uber autonomous or whatever they're going to call it, okay? You don't care what it is. You just want to get in the seat. Hopefully it's not going to have puke on it or something. And you're going to get to where you get to, and then you're going to get out and go away. And if you're a young person and and this stuff really doesn't do anything for you, and a lot of people say, oh, this is like my grandpa would do this, or my mom would want to do that, or my dad likes this, but they don't. Guess what? This is perfect because I don't have to pay for it. I don't even need it or want it. And then you walk in, sit down. As long as that screen connects to my cell phone, I'm good.
So if this is a taxi, and if it is a bench front seat, I have a funny little question. I don't know if you saw it or not. Are there cup holders?
There are not.
So when I used to work with India a lot, we would have our designers in India who would do a lot of the CAD work, and I would direct them on how the design needed to be done. And I was showing one of the designers in India, and they were always laughing at our need for cup holders in the US. And I showed him one of my cars, and that was the first thing he asked. I was like, how many cup holders does it have? And I'm like, all right. I went to the auto show, and I was looking at a truck. And I was looking, and they had cup holders in the doors, cup holders in the dash, cup holders on the center console, and then there was a flip-out piece on the center console that had more cup holders. There were 11 cup holders in the front row seat. Fits 2 people. 11 cup holders. I'm like, who in marketing thought that you needed 11 cup holders to make a combination? And it's just because the designer of the door says, well, I designed a door, I have to put cup holders in my door. Designers of the instrument panel, well, I'm an instrument panel, I have to have cup holders in my instrument panel. Designer of the center console, designer of the fold-down armrest, I have to have them in mind, And it's almost like all these people don't talk to each other.
And that's the difference, again, between Tesla and everybody else. Because these guys are all in the same room. They solve all their problems jointly. And they don't have a whole lot of in-between management folks, supervisors, directors, managers, whatever. They don't have a lot of that in between. They're all paid to come up with a car, not a door, not an instrument panel, not a console. They come to produce a car. Slightly different mode of thinking. When you get into that type of a mode, you wind up with something that looks like this and not something that looks like that. That's my opinion anyway.
That type of an evolution over 6 years,
yeah,
is
breathtaking.
I've said it that as a engineer, I've worked with you now for 3 years. Yeah. Before I came here, I was signing off OK to tool data for a vehicle that I was developing. That was 3 years ago. That car is still not on the road. With all of the structure that the OEMs put into their systems now, all of the momentum that they have behind their large conglomerates, their large industry, things are very, very slow. Now, if you're going to say that innovation in 3 years, nothing is innovated because it's the same design that hasn't even gone into final production yet in 3 years. You can literally be 10 years as an engineer, only have 3 vehicles under your belt, and if you were within the same company, you designed all 3 the same way. So a 30-year career, you're not really gaining much. You're gaining 6 more vehicles.
Well, here's the thing. There's 2 ways of looking at 30 years of experience. One of them is 30 years, one time, times 30. And the other one is, like the way I look at it is, I worked on tons of different things. When I say I've got 30 years of experience or 40 years of experience, it's because I've worked on so many different projects, from kids' toys to missiles and bombs to automobiles to anything you could possibly imagine. Every day is something new. But if you are pigeonholed and you're going to be the door trim panel and that's it, you're going to do 30 years, 1 year, 30 times. And that's what, to me, is death. I would never take that job. Never, not again. So. But anyways, we're kind of like getting the wrap-up symbol. So, Carl, thanks again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and thanks for watching. Hope it was informative. We started rambling there. I started rambling, and hopefully you got something out of it. And if you happen to be someone who's designing or trying to design a new vehicle, and you want to know exactly how much it's going to cost, or you'd like to know the best way that you can get the job done, that's least amount of cost, least amount of parts, least amount of labor, on and on and on, and high quality, give us a call. Munro Associates would be happy to talk to you. Thanks so much. Have a great day.